treats, right? Those are treats.
I don't know, we have enough brothers that stole my food.
Yeah. Yeah.
I only have them in Mario's family. So there were 9. They take the tortillas and they lick them.
So that you'd have.
So then they're, okay, you want it? I already want it.
The manager called me about this. I bit my tongue. I refrained from bringing up 3 or 4 issues that residents bring up about that. So, maybe he'll call me again and I can bring it up.
Okay, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started, because it is 5:30, and we have some items this evening. But first of all, we are going to call our special December 3rd special town board meeting to order, with the first item needing to be roll call.
Mayor Christie Melendez,
Here,
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett,
Here.
Miles Baker, Barry Wilson,
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer, Tom Jones,
Here.
David Soslowski.
Here.
okay. Next item on the agenda is review of the agenda by the board and addition of any items of new business to the agenda for consideration by the board. Is there anything additional, or if not, I would seek a motion to accept as presented.
I'll move the agenda be accepted as presented.
Second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Suslowski with a second for Mr. Bennett to accept the agenda as presented. All in favor signify with aye. Opposed? Okay, agenda is approved as presented. Moving on to discussion items then, our first item this evening of discussion will be the recycling center discussion. Mr. Lucas, are you going to be leading that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. Tonight, we're here to talk about the Brush and Recycling Center. This first piece of this is really just the recycling center. As you know, the transfer of the Diamond Valley property to CNSP kind of facilitated the necessity to relocate that site. We would have relocated or probably on the same site had this not had happened, because we were going to be expanding the park facilities there. But now that that's not happening, we had to go do some research and determine where's the best place for it to move in a very short time frame. So staff, which included Shane, Terry, myself, and Dennis Wagner, spent a significant amount of time, but very quick as well, as I mentioned in my memo, looking at all the properties that the town owned that could conceivably be a location for a recycling center. And remember, as Jess will talk about in a little bit, this is not the Brush site. This is just the recycling of commodities such as glass or cardboard, those kind of things. So on the left, you can see the variety of sites that we looked at that we currently own. And I'll go through them very briefly. And then on the right, you can see kind of the pros and cons. And for the most part, I listed the cons. On the left-hand side, so Lebu Park site, the major con there was infrastructure cost, i.e. there would have needed to be a turn lane put on to add to Crossroads, as well as a road infrastructure that would have split that site and connected Pelican Farms to Rain Dance. I believe that in the future will be called Iron Wheel or Iron Horse Drive. The Kodak property, infrastructure there, again, turn lane off of 257, and the Crossroads doesn't go through yet, as well as there's only a few buildable lots there, and really that site sits in the floodplain. Kiger, infrastructure there, again, cost prohibitive with turn lane off of 13, and that property is actually in the floodway. You know, floodplain, you can get away with it a little bit. Floodway means the water is literally going to come up and move through there. So those, if we had a flood, that location, potentially you could see those containers that hold the recyclables literally float down the road, which we wouldn't want to do. Eastman Park, again, floodway, because that, what we were considering was up along the backside of the Food River, kind of tucked back by the skate park. It's hidden, so not a great place. You recall we had some issues recently out of Diamond Valley, and that's kind of out of the public view as well, but not so much as Eastman Park would have been. And then just traffic congestion. We already try to be very aware and cognizant of the church. That church is growing. So ultimately, those 4 locations did not work. The best option, and I wouldn't call it a perfect option, but the best option that we'll talk about tonight ultimately became the public works site. And the reason for that is the turn lane already exists off of County Road 13, or, not County Road, Town Road, Highway 15, thank you. Street 15. And then we already had some asphalt there in terms of parking lot. It's not in an ideal location in terms of it's up front and center. We really would like to long-term avoid what we had at Diamond Valley, which, you don't wanna have that aesthetic look of, got a beautiful public works site you're driving into, and bam, there's a recycling center. So one thing that we're gonna have to be very cognizant of in that location is landscaping, try to hide it and conceal it as much as possible. So that pretty much is how we came to the conclusion of where we're at tonight in terms of location. Obviously, you can get into any details if you have other ideas, but I will tell you that we are under a time crunch. CNSP wanted us out of there by the end of the year. Shane has been able to discuss with them and kind of get us by end of the first quarter of next year. But ultimately, with their construction going on there, we need to move. So this is where we're kind of at tonight, and why we're bringing it forward to you tonight to hopefully give us the nod to proceed forward so that we can be under construction over the next month or so in the winter time and get it open to the public.
If we chose to do nothing, if we chose not to continue this service,
Yes.
where would our residents have to go?
Um,
Because with the brush, they have Hageman, right?
Correct. They would have to choose, correct, Terry, jump in, but I believe it would be one of the landfills, one run by Weld County out on 14.
Yeah,
And
14 is waste management.
or they could go over to Larimer County to that landfill as well. If we
Okay.
chose to get out of the business.
So there are two nearby ones.
Yes, I mean,
If we would choose, I mean,
we would be asking our residents to drive a little ways. It's not as close as Hagerman is. in
but
terms
wasn't
of
this
brush
one
and recycling.
more used by businesses?
No, that was brush and recycling. So
Okay.
the commodities, what we're talking about here, was more residential.
This is more residential, okay.
So you have this, I think you have this one on your document as well, but this kind of gives you an idea where it would be. So this is 15, and this is the turn into the public works site. The water tower is right here. So someone could drive in, make this loop, and there'll be a gate right here. I'll show you a better slide in a second. But this would be the recycling center. It would be fenced. So this is the existing parking lot. It comes over to about right here where my mouse is going up and down. So we would expand it a little bit. We will lose approximately 15 parking spaces. So the negative to that in short term is it would create some tight parking for employees during the day. I don't think it's a big deal if we have an event at night. Obviously, we still lose those 15 parking spaces, but if we need to, we've done that in the past, and we had a larger event kind of borderline when staff is there, we've asked staff on occasion to park in the back, which that's not a policy we tend to do every day, but I think Terry has allowed that in the past a few times. So what we're proposing here, and this kind of gives you a little more of a zoomed in view, so the water tower sits up in this area. There'd be a gate right here, the whole thing's fenced, you could drive in, drop off your recyclables. The truck that comes in from Waste Management comes in to pick it up, can also drive in here, back up, grab the container, and pull out. So the positives here are we don't have to put in a turning lane. There's not large, we still have infrastructure costs that we're gonna talk about in a second, but it's not exorbitant, not talking about several $100,000 for a turn lane here. It is not the permanent home. I'll talk to you about that in a few more slides, but ultimately this is the best location that we've determined for it to go for the next several years. So we did a cost estimate. You have a separate sheet here because it's a little tough to read on the screen. It ultimately would cost us about $107,000 to relocate the site here. And I will tell you, and you'll see it on this next slide, and it doesn't really break out in terms of numbers, but more of scope of work. This number originally was about $250,000 from the contractor estimate. We have met, and staff, meaning Public Works and Parks combined, will do a lot of the work. The work you see over here on the left. Site demolition, i.e. removing some curb and gutter that's in existence in order to expand the parking lot, removing landscaping, doing the erosion control for the project, moving our video surveillance from where we have now out there, expanding upon what's already out there on the building. All the earthwork and grading we can do in-house. A little bit longer term, and that could be a year or two out, asphalting, so early on, we'll just put rock down for expansion. Doing any site concrete work, and then landscape and irrigation. That's not in the $107,000 budget. We would do that in-house over time. The earthwork and that kind of stuff to get the grading will get done immediately in the next month or so by staff, barring a lot of snow or super cold weather. So the $107,000 really talks about what's on the right-hand side, which is the contractor doing survey and layout, electrical, and fencing. And quite frankly, it is the fencing that drives that $107,000 cost. As well as the electrical. So there'd be an electric gate. It's not manned, so it's open, whatever hours we choose, say it's 8 to 5, 7 days a week. Gate opens, gate closes. There'll be a buzzer inside that, if Jess shows up at 4:59 and it closes at 5 o'clock and the gate closes behind her, she could push a button to open the gate to get out. And then it'll give her a couple minutes and then it'll shut on its own. So a little bit of a safety issue, so she's not.
Is this gonna have to be a manned
It
facility?
will not, it will not.
Will
be.
not have to be.
Right. So that's what you really have before you tonight in terms of our request to proceed is to allow us to do the work that's on the left, as well as hire a contractor to do what appears to be about $107,000 worth of work on the right to get this done. We feel like we can get it done in the next 60 days or so, weather permitting. We do have, we were trying to figure out how we pay for it in next year's budget. There is $90,000 that we would have spent on brush recycling, i.e. bringing the tub grinder in. We won't have to spend that. Jess will talk about that may need to be amended depending upon what you ultimately choose to decide in terms of the rebate program for brush recycling.
And how we said initially, it was a part of this year's budget, it was part of the $4.1 million to do Demon Valley Park. Had, they're not, to relocate the facility on site. And so, moving it now, we're really we don't really have a line item more specifically, but because we do have that brush recycling number, I think we're pretty close to what's already in there. It's $90,000. So we're not miles away from that number by doing this plan.
And I wanted to share with you, this kind of really is the last slide on this piece of the topic. This is the overall site right now. You kind of see this triangle here. There's an additional 52 acres that eventually will become Tockenkala Park. In a perfect world, we would own that today and be developing it today, but we're not sitting in that perfect world at this moment. When the time comes to develop that, and or when the homes develop in that area that necessitates a turn lane to be put in farther up. And so, for example, the turn lane sits about right here. Before another turn lane could enter into Tockenkala Park in the future, we have to go 600 feet to the north. So before that happens, or until that happens, the recycling center would stay where I've shown you on the screen. What we have built into it though is, eventually when it moves, we would move it up into Tockenkala Park, probably push it back a little bit off the road. Again, we wouldn't want to be in the same situation we were with Diamond Valley, having that front of the park. But we've designed the, let me go back a second. We designed this piece to become future expanded parking lot. So when it moves up to Tockenkala Park, we can remove the gate, remove the fencing, and we can repave that portion, and that parking lot is now expanded. So it's not like we are gonna put it here and then when it goes away, we have an eyesore. It easily allows for the expansion of staff and public parking in the future.
And I even think the relocation of the fencing too, so we're putting up nicer fencing, I think the fencing can go up.
Probably go up there.
Probably the only thing we're spending here that we really can't, recover is the electrical, because it's 3-phase and that's a big number. Maybe the town would have a reason to have it there, but I doubt it. I think that's gonna probably just be a number that, if we relocate in 3 or 4 years, we'll say, well, that was $50,000 we spent, but I think it's also unavoidable. We've talked about, well, as far as the 3-phase and the cost of that electrical.
Charging stations maybe?
Yeah, that's
Potentially,
actually
that's a great thought.
really
The
good.
electricity there ought to be some.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go.
That's why you're not pro temp, think of that kind of stuff. Good job. Just hit us 50,000.
Yeah, okay.
So that really is it in terms of the presentation, in terms of relocation and what we believe it will cost and what town staff needs to do, and the contractor needs to do, and kind of time frame. Be glad to answer any questions you may have.
I'm just looking at the cost estimate, Eric. I think you said the fencing, electrical drive, the cost, certainly I see the electrical here, more than half in terms of cost. Is the fencing sort of hidden in that exterior?
Exterior improvements, it's basically all fencing.
It's almost all fencing there?
I
Yes.
believe that's the major driver.
And I guess just to take this step back for me, so right now, and I've used that recycled park, everything's people are just putting stuff in, you drive in during open hours. What does it cost us to have that towed away and disposed of?
It's a good question. Right now, Waste Management owns all of the compactors and everything that sits in that
Within the-
location. They come and dump them for us, and they charge us the dumping fee to dump them. So that's for the cardboard, the glass, plastic, whatever it may be. So to get rid of all of it, all the equipment is what you're talking about?
No,
No,
right.
just what's it cost?
So I assume the same structure will be used here.
Yeah.
In that,
Yeah.
somebody else, the compactors will be on. Do we need to pay to have that stuff hauled away and processed? I can't imagine doing it.
Yeah, we get billed from Waste
Right.
Management
Right.
for recycling for
Right.
everything, right?
But they might charge us a fee to move the equipment out to this new site. But if it's not completely full, they won't go ahead and dump it just to dump it. They'll move it out there, and then, 10 days from then, when it gets full, then they'll come in and dump it and charge us.
I'm just
Wasn't
kind
this
of,
the program that was costing us like 80 grand a year?
That was the two combined.
Did you, what is just this piece? Or does this one have a
I'm going off of
better cost
memory. I
recovery?
want to say it was like $10,000 total.
Is recycling?
I can go and grab.
Okay.
Which
That's off of memory.
We were making money on it for a while.
Yeah, we were making money, but the commodity market is just going.
Yeah, and are they still taking glass? Because a lot of local recycling folks now are not permitting glass in the recycling,
I
so
thought so.
they still are, okay.
Off of memory, and that's probably a 1.5 year old number, I want to say it was around 10. The driver of the loss of 80,000 was the
The other
brush.
Yeah.
Okay, which we're getting rid of.
Correct.
yeah. That's why, I like your idea on brush, for that very reason. If it's 10,000 though.
Yeah.
It's
It was minimal in terms of the overall
Right.
loss.
There's
Can I ask-
another place that Public Works to
Oh, there's a
kind of
chair right
hide
here.
it, is there?
No, the reason why, we talked about that, we could potentially put it in the back. But what the infrastructure cost would be to put a road all the way to back, it would take that $107,000 up exponentially.
So the trash services for recycling, the budget number in 2019 is $22,000. So that's our annual operational cost. And then what'll be coming out of that, like Eric mentioned, this won't need to be a manned site any longer. And so that was about another $22,000 we had budgeted, which is gonna be the savings next year.
Seems like just with that location where it's at, people would be less likely to dump all the batteries and lawnmowers and
I hope
tires.
so.
Well, and that's one, why we feel that we need to have the gate to close, so there really isn't these midnight dumps.
Right.
And then secondly, why we wanna make sure we have the video surveillance up.
Right.
So those two things are, I think really driving the expense here, but also, gonna pay for themselves in spades.
And just to go back on what you were saying, long-term plan on that area to the north. That's private. The town doesn't own that.
The town has it will be deeded to us upon development up there.
It's basically already
That's all.
been set aside for us with talking Colin, that annexation. That 52 acres was set aside, actually, I think it was more than that, because part of where we put the public works site was part of that site as well. So it's already been sectioned off, the landowner knows it's coming to the town. So it's just when that develops, call it develops, that will come to the town as a community park.
When you say develop, do you mean homes?
I do.
That kind of development?
Yes.
So it's not the whole area that would come to the town, but only a
The,
certain,
the 52
52 acres will
acres
come to the
is the
town.
community park. Cause this is now I was put up between 3 different landowners, I believe.
at least.
Yeah.
So there's development up here in this area. His mouse is slow tonight. Over in this area and above, and then development over here.
Yeah, they have a whole section on the east side.
Yes.
For
Yeah.
homes.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Then that whole rectangle would end up being town property?
That's right.
Can I ask a dumb question? The extension of the parking lot to create this from where it's at right now, I'm sure this has already been thought of, but I'm just crossing that T, which is the Greeley main water line runs right very close to us continuing to expand in that direction. Well, we obviously don't come close enough to be,
Yeah, we're not even
to be in
close.
their easement or anything
We're
like
not
that.
even close to it.
Okay.
It does sit, we will encroach a little bit into the stormwater retention. We don't have any issues there in terms of anything 100-year flood of that, and like drifting of the containers away. And we will be, because we're gonna build on that site, to move parks out there, we will be compensating with another stormwater area probably to the north, which will offset any losses by a slight expansion of the parking area.
And Paul, I'd say it's actually really a good question, because that Greeley water line comes up in every discussion out there. Every discussion.
Well, it's
So
a massive easement on both sides of that thing,
Yes.
that
And it's not really a deep line, and it's an old line, so I think everybody's really sensitive to anything happening around there.
I think it's only 18 inches under the surface.
I want to hear from Terry. Terry, are you okay with this move on the public works facility property, number one, and number two? Are you okay with it taking up some of the parking and you don't foresee a problem there?
I don't see a problem with it. We've talked about it quite a bit, Shane and I and Eric. And with the parking that we have in the back, we can always compensate if there's gonna be a big meeting leave those places open in the front. All employees will park in the back, so I don't see a problem with it. I think it's probably a good solution to the problem right now. Long-term, Talking Calla will be the answer, but short-term, I think this is the place it needs to be.
How many years is that out? Are we talking 5, 10?
I would guess we're somewhere in the 5 to 10 range. And again, that's based on growth and demand.
So we'll have this probably at least 5 years,
I
maybe
would say-
maybe
I would
longer.
say minimum of
You're
5.
thinking. Just trying to think about, the value of what we're putting here and the use, and if we had to get 5 years, and it's a good location for our folks to still continue to do what they need to do.
and this may have already come up, but this doesn't include anything with the brush recycling facility at all.
Not
That's-
at all.
Any other questions about recycling center? Because then we are moving on to
We'll get into brush.
brush organic
Oh.
yard waste rebate program.
So I'll turn it over to Jess.
Okay,
Good evening, so I'm here to talk to you about a brush/organic yard waste rebate program. So we'll do a little quick background. As we said before, the cost of a brush site has continually increased over the years. Historically, the use of that has been tracked commercial, and the bulk of that cost of close to $80,000 expenditure. In your 2019 budget process, talked about this and the relocation of the recycle center, that we will no longer be doing brush and yard waste recycling. So it was directed to staff to look into a rebate program. The intent was that we want to continue to encourage residential properties to recycle brush and organic yard waste. So staff did some analysis, and I'm gonna hand this out too for you guys if you don't mind. We looked at some area recycle centers, so Hageman's, A1, if you guys know where they are at, they're out towards Eaton. And then any Larimer County and Weld County services is, we reside in both counties. So taking a look and trying to compare it as best as we can, apples to apples. Your general load of yard and garden waste, so composite, those that you can do, help me out, compost, Leaves and grass clippings are generally $10.25 a load, something you can throw in your trunk, that size, to a small pickup truck. Sod and soil, dirty rocks, branches, and brush are about 22.5 a load. This, you can compare this to about 3 yards, and, or 3 cubic yards. That would be a cube that can sit in an 8-foot truck bed. Okay? Put those together and we average out a cost. Your general consumer would pay $16.25 a load. We also had to think about overhead expense, so what it would take if we were processing these rebates. So we have our personnel costs, the time it would take to process the rebate at 1/10 of an hour, and then our general supplies, so postage being the bulk of that, and envelopes and paper and such. So we found that a cost per rebate is $1.55. So then we took that information and threw some scenarios in, and that handout is a little bit better representation for you, so you don't have to squint. So at the different levels of participation, rebates at $5, $10, and $15, and our total costs, including overhead. So looking at this, just remember 2 variables that drive this impact the cost is the rebate amount and the level of participation. That, and the level of participation we don't know until we try, correct?
I'm sorry, but instead of as a percentage, when you say level of participation, is 100% assuming that every household is going to use it?
9,770 residential accounts that we have for our utility system, that is based on, that number is based on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have a sense of what the usage rate is now, today?
For the brush site,
Yeah, we don't know. Track it, right?
Yeah.
How can we?
and that, and again, that is one of those variables that drives our impact, but we don't, the one real unknown until we really
Yeah.
try.
Okay.
Okay? Questions so far? Okay. So with all of that said, staff is recommending this program, and definitely a pilot program for the year of 2019 to see how this works. Residential only would be our recommendation. We would begin this January 1st. We recommend $10 rebate once a year. They would need proof of residency and a receipt for the recycling that they went to, the recycling center. And then we would track that by confirming their residency with their utility bill. Create a check for them, send it out on their way. We would report participation quarterly and would promote it quarterly through communications as well. Questions?
Any chance we can just apply credit to the utility bill?
That's what I was
We've
thinking,
asked
rather
about
than
that.
have to
So,
issue checks.
it's a good idea, but when you think about it, we would be subsidizing the water fund account by giving them a rebate on their water bill, and somehow we would have to make that up. I mean, it could be a transfer, potentially.
Yeah, but we'd have, between the storm drain, water, you know, people get bills for different reasons in Windsor. It's not always the same one, like where I live, I just get the storm drain fee. So it
Might not be
seemed
a
like
best
maybe it
practice.
would make it more complex to do that versus simple, so.
Just seems,
I
sending a
know it
$10
does,
check.
it seems silly to send $10 checks if we can't. So it would just seem easier that
And
it
ten
could
is
be an application to a bill that they have coming from us,
Credit.
a credit.
Could you credit the bill somehow?
Right, and we can, I mean, you guys, yeah, we talked about it a little bit internally. I think again, it's gonna be, I rely a lot on finance to just say, Dean, what's easier? Picking up all these transfers and making sure that these funds stay whole, or cutting the check. So I don't know if,
I would say our cost would go up personnel-wise and per rebate, honestly, with having to do
What fund, did I miss, what fund would this come out of?
the general fund.
General fund,
Mhm.
okay.
yeah, right now it's just under public works.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the impact?
Right now it's- Okay.
Maybe.
You just Venmo my $10.
And that's this sheet too.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
see it too.
Maybe in 5 years.
Make it easier.
Well, it's on 50 to 60.
It's like watching TV.
Recharge your Dutch Bros card, just put it on there.
Do we know of other communities that do this in approximate
There were
participation?
none that had rebate programs in our area because they, like Larimer
They don't
County,
have their own-
they
right,
have their own.
Right.
recycling centers.
You know, like, I don't know if Loveland still does, Loveland used to have free, but you had to show like your driver's license or residency, and you had to hold up. So it's free just for residents.
So the resident would get a receipt,
Mhm.
they would come in,
Mhm.
and we would check their water bill.
Yep.
Okay, but they're not on our water.
It'd be a Windsor utility account, so anybody that gets all water from us, water, sewer, storm bills, storm
Or so-
drainage, that's what that 9,000.
I'm gonna guess it's gonna be less than 25%.
Oh, that's what I'm trying to think.
Because we're making them drive through hoops to do this,
Exactly,
and it's only $10.
right. I'm not gonna take, I'm
People
gonna waste
people
my
are gonna
time.
say, who cares?
Yeah.
I'm
It's
not gonna take
$10.
the time to do
I mean, you're
that.
gonna have a few who, they were challenging us at, what did we raised it to 5. So though, you're gonna have a few of those who
Right.
will, but I don't even think we'll see
I think it's good,
10.
I think it's good to try it for a pilot year, because I think you're right, I was just trying to.
If it was on your water bill or something, and there was an easier way,
Right.
but we're making them, come in, they gotta collect the receipt, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I mean, but I
Right,
just, I don't think it's gonna drive
Right.
the participation.
The proof of residency and the receipt is similar to what we require for your toilet and washer rebates in our water
Right.
conservation program, so
So
we're
that's the
really not
same.
going outside of that.
Well, and it's an easier way for us to track it, you know, if we have, Tom, his address, I mean, if we send out a coupon to everybody, Tom may say, well, I'm fine, but everybody's, goes to their neighbors, hey, if you're not using it, I can use it, and Sosowski shows up with $400 worth of rebates.
Black market
Yeah,
develops.
exactly, so I just think that kind of thing, this way we know that we're taking care of the homeowners,
Yeah.
there's no commercial rebate, this is just, something we can track per home. And we could, because, staff, I don't know, I think that participation is gonna be low. I think one of the bigger reasons is we've got established neighborhoods like here in Old Town. As you go out, a lot of these newer neighborhoods, there's no trees, the vegetation isn't mature enough to drive this a whole lot. So, I think a program like this in 20 years may look different for us than it looks today.
Well, in my neighborhood way up, I have 2 brush recycling containers. So unless I have something really big to get rid of, I can cut it up in a small tree and get it in there. So I've gone out there for other recycling, but not brush. So I can see like in my neighborhood not being used very often at
So
all.
who does that, like your HOA, has it been?
You have to, it's like, yeah, cause we use waste Gallegos, yeah. And so I pay extra like $10-12 a month during the summer months to have this extra container for brush recycling. So not everybody has it, but driving around, a lot of people do.
Our HOA last summer did the first time where they had a brush recycling day just for our neighborhood, granted it's HOA. Metro District could be a little bit different, I guess, but, they just kept bringing the big roll-offs all day. As they would get full, they would just keep bringing them. They ended up going through 5 of them in one day, just in our one neighborhood, just in our neighborhood, and.
Well, we talked about that too, are we nixing that idea? We talked about having a fall or a summer cleanup where everybody just had the opportunity to bring,
Right, no, we are running that concurrently, Mayor.
Oh.
We just wanted to get this program in front of you. We're also talking about, the cleanup days as well.
so I wouldn't be that concerned about what the budget item's gonna be. I don't think you're gonna have
If somebody really needs it, they get it.
any folks who are gonna go to the trouble to use this.
Or you can get the word out, put it in the water bills or something.
Lots of ways, water bills, social media, on our website, we've got lots of opportunities and different ways to do it.
Well, and I know that
And they're measurable as well.
it's, Parks and Rec, I know there's departments that have like the contact info for a lot of the metro districts and HOAs, management companies, et cetera. We could even put out the word to try to organize, not the town doing the organizing, but to have the local HOA metro districts to have these cleanup days where overall it would save town resources, but yet it develops community within each neighborhood around town. I'm about developing community.
Well, you referenced the average being $16 for the third party. Are they doing that by weight? Is there a chance that someone could go and use their service and only cost them $8?
No, it's by load, by the back of a car, by the number of bags, or by a cubic yard, which is measured by so high in a truck by an
Right.
8-foot bed. And those are generally what these recycling centers use. When it comes to commercial, it's scaled.
Yeah, probably no one will make the trip for 2 bags of leaves. I just wondered if there's somebody who could have an $8 charge. And then is it $10 or the actual invoice, whichever?
It's the lowest was $10.25.
Well, and another thing we could do, I mean, if, you know, staff just kind of picked the $10 because again, we don't know what the utilization will be, but if the board felt like, well, geez, we may get more people if it's 15, you know, you guys
Yep.
will take whatever direction you want to give us, but we just kind of felt kind of risk adverse going too
Right.
much higher.
And we have a way of tracking it.
Yes.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
So we can see.
Yeah, and we can report back to the board, I would.
If nobody's using it,
Just
then
like
we
talked
can
about,
evaluate
like,
it, you know.
like kind of a midsummer, like maybe June or July 1st, because, you know, we're not gonna get anything January through March anyway. So, give you guys maybe a mid-year report and then give you one in the fall around budget time, so you know, geez, this program only spent, you know, $25 last year, so that we keep it going or not.
So at $10, it looks like break even is somewhere around 70% compared to what we're spending now.
That's right.
That's a no-brainer. Feeling lucky.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think if even if it was $15, I mean, it might bump it up some, it wouldn't be like, but you don't know, that's just what I think, you know?
So can I ask this question about how my business is on the Larimer County side, and I don't get my water from Windsor, but I do pay the storm drainage fee. And when I get my January storm drainage bill, because honestly, it's only like $37 for the whole year, I pay the whole thing for the whole year and then run that credit that works its way off throughout the whole year. And I don't know how many people on the Larimer County side that might look at that bill and go, this is a nuisance to pay the $2, it's only like $3.50 a month. So who would actually be writing a check or paying online bill pay or something for that? My point in all of that is, if those people on that side, if we were talking about a bill credit, et cetera, and they're paying that whole thing up front for the year, I don't know how many do that, not many.
No.
I was trying to think of that $10 credit, if we did end up going that route, if it's already been paid for the year and we're applying the credit, now they've got, it could just mess with the accounting system, I guess, is what I'm getting at. I don't know if they're gonna see the benefit
Well,
of
you
that.
made the point too, we have the money coming out of our stormwater funds,
Yeah,
which we don't want to touch. Yeah. We're very- yeah.
We
Yeah.
encourage people to do that, pay for a year,
oh,
but we still have some that pay the $3 reoccurring every month.
My recommendation would be that I mean, even though I don't think it's gonna generate lots of participation, I think we need to keep it at $10, just because I don't think, unless you do something very significant, but that's not the goal of this. The goal is, we want to just give folks an alternative to, because we're not offering that anymore. But there is another location that they can go to. And if we're still going to be looking at having a fall cleanup opportunity ourselves, that's the opportunity for those who don't want to mess around with any of this or whatever, they can, that's their opportunity to participate. Because we're gonna be paying for that 100%.
Right, well, and actually, well, not to get too far ahead of Jess, but her suggestion was, you know, if we had Hagemans, we have somebody there, say, okay, we've got this program, and any residents that bring us their brush, we can just kind of check them off the list there, and like, okay, you know, 210 Oak, you're done. So I think we could just kind of transfer this program to a one-day drop-off as well.
Yeah.
That's incentive for participation in that as well.
Yeah, and then because you'll be able to actually see the numbers and we can revisit it after it's
Right.
gone through at least some period of time to say, you know, and it might be something it's not even worth our time to continue to even do a rebate. But, but we still just maybe want to continue the messaging about our folks and then make sure we've got the cleanup dates. And that's where we also let them know, like you said, here's other opportunities during the year when we're not here, where you can go to do this.
And don't forget your HOA or your own trash provider too.
Right, don't forget, right, on our HOA or, you know.
I just drop them off over there.
Just drop it off both.
When you negotiate for the cleanup day, is there a chance they donate the pickup, the trash haulers? They used to, this was way back, some
That
years
is-
ago. But it's good PR for them, to just Severance does it every spring, they have the cleanup day, and I don't know how they work it, if they have to pay for it or not. But you might just see what they do.
It's a good point, and we have talked about that. I'm used to both asking the trash haulers and asking the landfill that to give us free tipping. You know, you can ask.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, guys.
Good job.
Well, moving along then, we're going to Frank State Wildlife Area.
Thank you. So we added this item to your agenda because we were made aware of the situation last Thursday, I think 28th. So wanted to discuss this with you. It is a very critical one in terms of preservation of open space, preservation of public access to this corridor along the river, as well as preservation for wildlife and protection of them, the wildlife in the river and those kind of things. So I wanted to give you a quick history of the Frank State. Really has combined 5 parcels together. It's about 374 acres, starting back in 1967 and completing in about 1995. And you'll see in a little bit, but the other pieces there, that there are, that the intent was the easement was to exist in perpetuity. There are retained rights that the landowner has and uses that they can do, and then ultimately, and why we're here tonight, is that easement can be transferred. So in the past, that site, as many of you have been here for a long time will recall, it's been known as the Frank State Wildlife Area. CPW has been the easement holder and allowed hunting and fishing and those kind of things in that area. As Windsor grew, it became very clear to them that hunting which was part of CPW's mission, really doesn't occur there anymore, and hasn't for many years. So back in 2014, there was an agreement that the board signed with CPW that basically said for these 3 things need to happen in order for then the town to take over the easement. The baseline study needed to be done, and the baseline study basically is an assessment of what is the condition of those properties today, so that we had something to study year after year and make sure that the condition of the property didn't change. And I'll give you an example of when that was done in 14, actually we had that done in 15. If there were no old cars on the property, that maybe the weeds and trees had grown through, but then in 2020, whoever the easement holder went out and saw that there was an old car there, the property has now changed to the negative. So we would then be asking, whoever the easement holder was, would be asking the owner of the property to clean it up. The baseline was there were never any old cars on the property. Now all of a sudden there are. You need to remove them because we are, as the easement holder, we're kind of the police for like.
Well, in any kind of conservation easement, they say, you can put up a restroom, but you can't put any playground structures. So that it's gonna also kind of guide, depending on the easement, improvements that can happen. Maybe like at-grade paths can happen.
Correct.
But other things can't. So really, whenever you hold a conservation easement, it's incumbent upon annually to go through and make sure they haven't built anything here that shouldn't be here. I mean, the old car thing is a good example, but really it's those permanent improvements that kind of pop up over time. So that's another reason for the baseline study.
And so then there was a management plan also created in 15 that basically said this is how the town or whoever was the easement holder would manage the property, the easement over time. And basically the intent there was open public access for fishing, probably hiking, bird watching, wildlife watching, that kind of thing. CPW, because there's no hunting there, they really don't want the property in terms of the management or oversight, and haven't since 2014. I can tell you from my own experience showing up here in 2015, every year, multiple times a year, they've asked us to take over it, and we've, as staff, have always been directed until the mining was complete, we're not taking it over. So we already had the first 2 bullet points done, but until mining was completed, the answer was no in terms of the town saying, we'll be the easement holder. Wade reached out to them on the 28th on a totally different topic. And they said, hey, by the way, we're now initiating the process of extinguishing the conservation easement. And he called me immediately and goes, whoa, because if they extinguish the conservation easement, that means those property owners, once that happened, they can do whatever they are allowed to do on the property. build, construct, limit public access, etc.
Thornton Water Project.
Could be a variety of things. So what we're, basically the gist of why we're here tonight is to, and we've indicated that we were gonna meet with you tonight. The reason we're here is to ask you to allow the town to become the easement holder, even though the mining isn't complete. I think there's still probably a few years of mining left.
I can tell you what's going on with the mining. I met with them in probably March, and they had 7 acres left to mine there. Now, the side, I think most of it where Frank State Wildlife Area
That's done.
is, I think that's done. It's more the area behind the concrete plant that's there now.
Correct.
They got permission from the property owner on the corner to do 20 acres there. I think from start to finish, they had 3 years to start to finish to do that. And then once they're done with that, they're gonna go back, hit that 7 acres, and then they wanna sunset that concrete plant. They told me in 5 to 10 years. There'd be some time, once that's all mined out, they would truck in materials from other locations, but ultimately they would then move that concrete facility away. They also said that, they were under the assumption, this was Best Way, which is now Burnco, I think. And they said that they were under the assumption the state would turn it over to us. And they said, we'll do whatever you want back there. We'll do the work. We'll create ponds with a path in between. We'll set it up how you want it, kind of on our way out. They have to kind of restore it back to it. The other thing was that corner they're on along 392 right now, that they're supposed to put that back to a level ground when they're done. So that's gonna be more dirt coming out. So it's gonna be a big hole for water. I don't know what we can do there. But anyway, that's just some information I had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
No,
No, I don't have any questions.
oh, okay. So
I had a
Can you go back to the map that, because so where, you're talking about the mining, you're talking about that gravel
So
pit?
13, so basically the Pooter trailhead right there along 13
Yeah.
is that little spot right there.
Yeah,
This is the area, see, it looks like there was a pond there. That is where they mined out, they just haven't reclaimed it yet.
okay.
And then what Barry was just talking about is this piece right in here is what they are currently mining, and there's a little bit over in this area.
But that's not part of the easement.
That is not part of this portion where my mouse is not part of the easement. But Best Way Concrete, and I can't remember, you probably read it, Burnco. Until they're done mining and get to the point where they're no longer gonna operate the concrete plant there, at some point they will leave and vacate the property and have reclaimed it all to something. They could technically just reclaim it to flat land, all of it if they wanted to. There are some discussions that the town staff has had, it's been several months, about reclaiming it and putting water back in there, but then that's a larger discussion in terms of augmentation and who pays for that and the lining of the pond. And there's a potential there that I'll get to in a few seconds in terms of how that may or may not benefit the town in terms of water augmentation.
And so the piece on the corner they're mining now, what they told me was the owner is a surgeon
Yeah, that's,
that lives in Denver and San Diego. And his goal is to put a Home Depot there, but now I see a for sale sign out there, so who knows what they'll
and
wanna
so,
do.
so you're aware, he owns both sides of the road,
Oh, okay,
Dr. Lee.
okay.
I had 2 questions.
Sure.
A few years back, there was some technical issue about us not being able to take on an easement because we hadn't had the experience with it.
Yes, so that
I'm
was the,
trying to go back in my memory.
what was the right word?
Well, that's only for tax credits.
Okay,
We hold several easements.
okay, I thought so. So, more technical issue. The other question I had, are we taking on additional maintenance staffing costs?
Just short annual cost of, I think it was $3,000 off the top of my head, it was in the memo. And that really is staff time going out annually, like Wade
Just
does
check
it
that
already.
that's right.
We go out and I shouldn't say Wade, he goes out and inspects the site, looks at the baseline report and says, has anything changed? And then there can be some enforcement there in terms of the old car example where if
So
one
he's the
showed
one
up-
who has to identify if there is a change and then report it and then follow through to make sure it gets fixed or corrected
Correct.
or
Correct.
whatever.
Correct.
So you have to play like the bad cop. If there's something like that, that has to be taken care of.
Correct.
The only thing you haven't touched on is the beauty of the area. It is very pristine back there,
Yes.
as far as
Yeah,
just.
I just want to, and these are on the screen, but I think everybody understands what a conservation easement is. But I wanted to make sure that you understood the purpose of it in terms of you're the landowner. And remember back that in 1967, the family had the foresight then to say, we want to make sure that this remains accessible to the public, kind of to your point, keeps that greenway along the Poudre River. That really is why this is so important and vital to the town. If not, it could become anything that is allowed under the current land use plan. So I think it's a critical decision for us. It's a great
How come they
tool.
didn't give us notice? Were they not planning to give us notice that they were distinguishing this? Or, I mean, because it was kind of like it was just a coincidence that you contacted them and caught this.
Yeah, I didn't wanna push on that,
Okay.
too much, but I was a little surprised, because we had talked about it every year, you know, and they would always ask if anything had changed in our perspective, and I'd always respond, no, we're waiting until mining activities are complete, so I was a little surprised when it came up last Thursday. I was like, whoa,
Yeah,
so.
and he called me in a
Yeah.
panic.
Because when we last checked with them and all that, those mining activities can take another 5 to 7
Yeah,
years. is
absolutely,
what
they
I'm
could.
told.
And just wanted you to remember that the landowner retains that right to do mining or whatever might have been in the original easement.
The mining should be done in about 4 years, but then they could continue to bring in
But
products.
they have 5 years, I think,
Yeah.
after that. they
Yeah,
have to- Yeah, they don't have to.
they could continue, if they wanted to continue to haul gravel from the off-site location, they could.
Yeah.
Our discussions that we'd had with them, I don't know, it's probably 8 months ago or so, was at some point, it becomes not cost-effective for them to bring gravel in. They wanted to be a good steward of not driving down Main Street with rock in a truck. At some point, it's gonna be where they need to vacate the site.
That's
and
the goal, yeah.
That was their intent. And so, to your point too, Barry, was the easement really does protect the greenway, the environment, the grasses, provides public access for things such as fishing or biking. The Poudre Trail goes right through it. It is a critical piece of the trail. It's a critical piece for future trail connections. It really creates that entire greenway from this location all the way into the Kiger property, all the way over to River Bluff. So there's a whole corridor of the river that is protected if we take this step. So it really gets into, and you see it on the screen and in the packet you passed out. Why is it so important? And you can kind of see that on the left.
What's the total acres?
It's 326 acres. And the piece I wanted to touch base with you also on was Wade and Dennis just came back from meeting with NISP on water mitigation efforts downstream of the NISP project. And this potentially, again, not putting words in their mouth, but potentially when it comes to the issue of who's gonna do water augmentation in that pond, if there's a pond there, who's gonna pay to line it, maybe that's an area for us to reach out to the NISP folks and go, hey, this is a perfect area for you to mitigate some of the NISP mitigation that they need to do along the Poudre in Windsor. And they've identified some other areas, for example, Eastman Park is one. But this potentially is a great negotiation piece for us as well in terms of water augmentation or storage.
Well, and how everything lines up, you know, we've talked a little bit about possibly the town having some storage as well. So this, yeah, I think there's some options.
So I just wanted to share with you that from the staff's point of view, and we hope that from the board's point of view, this is a critical piece of land, or I should say 5 parcels that we really should protect. So our ask of you tonight is to allow us to proceed and tell the state, indicate to them that yes, we're willing to take on the easement, work on that transfer, and then we'll go from there.
So it's just paperwork that
I
is
think it's just-
stopping it?
Yeah, it's
So
just-
why haven't we done that it was because of the mining previously?
It was-
Because
it
I
was
was
the
kind of
mining.
thinking like you can,
Yeah.
that we thought, I thought there was some other
I thought there was some
conversation about
technical
some
issue,
other
but it goes back to
technical.
the tax credits. There's no tax credit involved in this, so we're okay.
And we can complete it in the time and manner that they're looking for, as long as they know we're moving through the process, they're okay.
Yeah, they haven't indicated any time frame on it, and they are very open to discussing it. I think they would prefer to give it to us as opposed to extinguishing it.
Okay.
So we had to do a study and a plan, right?
which we have done.
Which you've done, and so it sounds like just signing off on it,
It's,
right?
it's really signing off, and then Wade would manage it, just like he does other easements that we have.
This'll, I don't know, I would assume some kind of board action, right, accepting the
Yeah.
easement, so
Yeah.
there will be some kind of board action.
We'll run it back
in the
to you.
next-
We should do a press release if this all goes through successfully. This is,
Absolutely.
Well,
It's
it's
a-
big. Yeah, it's big
critical piece.
for our community.
But it sounds like, Mr. McCarver, that we would probably need something that would essentially waive that one condition preceding regarding mining being completed, if not.
We probably extinguished that portion of the MOU part of the transfer,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
And Eric, the area you said they had previously mined that sort of looked like a little lake, that is within the boundaries of these?
Yes, it is.
Is it a lake?
It is right now. If you filled it full of water, it would be.
Oh.
I wouldn't call it super accessible at the moment, so there's probably some trails that need to be put around it that are allowed in the easement, if we wanted to. put
Where
that
are you
there.
talking about there? Where are you talking about?
It's right here. So you see in the yellow where it
Oh,
looks like
yeah,
there's a lake?
yeah.
That was a
There
lake.
originally was a lake
yeah,
there.
it was a very nice look, yeah, people were.
But that's what they've mined. So if you stop there on 13 and look, you can see the indentation.
big hole,
that
yeah.
It was a lake.
It just sounds like that, aside from the $3,000 walkthrough, that's inexpensive, you need to change your rates.
And this,
There could be some cost into saying, we now own this easement, that piece of property, they're no longer actively mining, we should do something with it.
Well, they said they would, when they reclaim it, they said they would do it to our specifications. However, so we could tell that the mining company would then dig the hole how we want it
The
shaped.
shape you want.
They go, if you want like a trail going and then rake it to 2 lakes with the trail going in between,
Right.
kinda like Jody Reservoir.
well, when's that determined? When we do this easement negotiation?
It's when they're done mining.
Yeah.
And they get into
So that
reclamation.
might be like 5 years down the road.
They're
Yeah.
required to do that. so
They're required to
they have
reclaim it.
So that's
Well,
not a debate, just
and I'm
because
envisioning
it's like-
something along the lines
Yeah.
of them saying, okay, well, it's gonna cost us $750,000 to fill
What can
this
we do
back
with
in.
that? Right.
You know, and your plan requires 1.5 million, so town, you kick in $750,000 and we'll do. I can imagine some kind of collaboration that way.
So we
And
could
David
fill
said-
it with water and put a whippet there.
Well, there you go. Good.
Not with him in the room, do not
There
teach
you
him.
go, there's a good place.
He's already encouraged.
Yeah, I thought we settled it.
Or we could just float down the river and with it too.
So up in the hash mark area there, in the blue, dark blue,
Yes.
where Connell has their pit that's full of water, that's not part of this.
No, it is.
It is.
It is part of this.
It is.
That's big. 300, what,
But that's
26?
not a pit anymore either, that's a lake, but the water's owned by Greeley.
But bird sanctuary, foxes.
So one thing the guy,
space, Open space, this is awesome.
yeah.
But there's no improvements to that though.
No, and there doesn't have to be,
There doesn't have to.
just open space and wildlife.
The open space wildlife.
And when I met with him, I wasn't elected yet, they even said that we could potentially return that, they kind of divided it into 3 sections, the yellow part where you're on, and then you have the concrete plant in the corner. They said they could potentially, they're done mining there, because we could potentially return it to you sooner, like before we're done mining. We
Right.
threw that out there. so-
Their concern there and expense would be, if we wanted to do that, would be fencing it, because obviously
Yes.
they have safety concern that they have a mining operation going on, they don't want the public
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah.
So that's why they have the fence up now. There's still the public that walk over
Oh,
from
yeah.
Ian's neighborhood,
We've got these things.
walk
Some
through,
people
but they're not
damage
supposed
back
to.
there, yeah.
Electronic.
What's the hash mean we were just hearing about?
Those are just the different parcels.
Yeah.
As they were dedicated.
Correct.
My house is on that.
So we kind of need long term. I mean, you've talked about how we don't really use the river very well.
Oh,
This would be
no.
a good place that you could have, I would say kayaking or whatever, there could be
It's a-
wading. I mean,
There's a
lot of
beautiful, if you haven't walked,
Without a lot
encouraging
of
this.
development,
If you walk on the north side,
yeah.
there's a beautiful scenic walk along the river, right? Those
Right.
gorgeous old trees.
Right.
It is very pretty.
That's what Ian's vision was. Ian.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in favor of this, I think we can.
You wanted the river
Right.
walk.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I think, so you have the
Works for you.
direction.
So when we see in the purchase,
Thank you.
Okay,
the dumpster.
Oh, I wanted to ask though,
It's industrial.
does that easement have a timeline, the one that you'd be putting together, is there like, it's only for 20 years or something, and then we gotta?
It's perfect.
I just need to see.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to ask, our audio visual self-recording, so we're going to go into executive
Okay.
session. So I guess, do we do the motion first?
Yeah.
Let's go.
We're gonna move into, executive session. David, would you make the motion?
Okay, Madam Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute, Section 24-6, 402, sub 4E1, for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with respect to Colorado National Sports Park.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor to move into executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We will move into executive session.
So I'll go and
Yes.
grab
Bring
Mr.
in
Chesky.
our